So, now that you've had a chance to explore our First Nations Museum of Learning, I guess, for lack of a better word, what did you find out? What did you learn? Okay. Claire, what did you learn?
First Nations and Europeans. The people who were involved were the First Nations and Europeans. The people had many fights about land. The First Nations traded things like beads, fur, leather, and land. The Europeans wanted the land, so they traded guns to help the First Nations with their hunting. Samuel de Champlain discovered Quebec City in 1603, New France, and he explored North America. There were many fights over land. They acted the way they did because they had different ideas about what was best for their people. Henry Hudson found Hudson's Bay in New York.
Thank you. Did somebody else have something different that they would like to share? Tyler, what did you figure out?
I found out that the First Nations came to greet Samuel de Champlain,
Yes?
and he shot them and called them savages. And
Wait.
they never let peace.
Which is a little bit disturbing, isn't it?
Yeah.
That certainly didn't set off a very good tone to begin with in terms of their connection with each other. Allie?
I learned that Samuel de Champlain went on 21 voyages.
Okay.
And his first voyage
Yes?
was across the Atlantic Ocean into Quebec, to Montreal, and back to Spain. His second voyage was across the Atlantic Ocean into Port Royal, to Cape Cod, and back to Spain.
What did you learn?
I learned that Samuel de Champlain was a prisoner held held in England
Okay.
for a couple years until he made peace with them and gave up his journal.
So, hold on. So he was a prisoner before when he was in England, and then when he actually met the First Nations, how did he treat them?
Oh, bad, because he never saw them.
He thought he was I think
He was surprised.
But he had to give up his journal to get out of jail because they wanted his ideas. That's why they held him captive.
I just wonder if his horrible life experience before kind of
Affected it now.
that you wonder, don't you, if that might have made a change. If he had been treated well by others, I wonder if that would have made a change. Okay, Layla's dying over here. So Layla, and then we'll move ourselves around. Yes, Layla. Wait, that's not a good choice. Yes, Layla.
I found out what the long-term effects of the fur trade.
Okay, and what did you find out that they were?
The Europeans had further geographical
Yeah.
knowledge. I found out that means newer places
Okay.
in that place. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because of their fur trade trips.
Really? That is kind of interesting. What did you find, Jenna?
I learned about the treaties,
Okay.
and the names of the treaties in 1713 were the Treaty of the Treaty of Portsmouth and the Treaty of Sweet. And I found out how the First Nations and Europeans felt about treaties.
Okay.
And the First Nations weren't sure really they felt about treaties. I guess they were uneasy
Okay.
on it because they thought of it as signing off their land to the Europeans.
Which would be a little bit disturbing, wouldn't it? So then what did the Europeans think of it then?
Well, the Europeans just wanted them to bring treaties to bring peace, which is kind of what they are meant to do.
Okay. And Ella, what did you find out?
I learned about the diseases the Europeans brought to the First Nations. Some of them were smallpox, measles, mumps, some long words.
Influenza, I think, was one, right? And wasn't there like a yellow fever?
something like
Diphtheria?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then another one who was like typhus.
Now, you know what was interesting? I tweeted out somebody's work here on diseases. I can't remember whose it was. Maybe it was yours, Waleed. And somebody, Mr. So, who happens to work at the Peel Board, he wrote us back and he asked if there was anything that the First Nations or the Europeans could have done to kind of avoid getting the diseases. If anyone can think of a reason, like what may have caused them, and is there anything that they could have done to avoid getting them? An interesting question. Okay, well, Lead, I knew you had something to share from before, so what did you say?
I said that some of the diseases could have been from the fur trading because they probably, when the First Nations people got the fur, probably had leftover bacteria and stuff, and they could have prevented that by washing it, probably.
Okay. Anyone else have an idea? Because he actually came up with a second one, but we'll see what other people may think too. I want to kind of move myself around here. Okay, Ella, I'll go to you and then I'll come back over here to Ashkan. Ella.
I think they could have prevented it by cleaning their meat properly and if something went wrong with the Europeans, maybe not interacting with them for a bit so they're not gonna throw.
Right, which, you know what? Do we kind of do something like that today? Like, what happens when you get sick around here? Like, really sick? Like, have the flu when you're throwing up or whatever? What do you do? Mark, what do you do? Okay, and do they have medicine for these diseases? No. What else do we do now that's kind of similar, I guess? Yes?
They could probably go see a blacksmith and probably get some sleepy for healing.
It's funny. I don't know if it would have been a blacksmith, but you do have kind of a concept. Do you think? What do you think?
If you think in that school, if someone's really, like now,
Yeah?
if someone's really, really sick, the teacher would probably send them home.
Why do we send them home? Sky?
Because you don't want anyone other that's around them to get the same thing that they have.
And back then, would they have sent these people home? Would they? I wonder what the housing was like. How many people live in our houses? How many people do you have in your family right now? Living in your houses. How many do you have?
4.
4? What do you have?
6.
Okay. Okay. What? Okay, Mark.
6 if you include my grandparents.
Okay. What about you, Tyler? Okay. What about you, Allie?
6 and including my hamster. 7.
Okay. Raise your hand if you have just 2 people living in your family. Raise your hand if you have 3 people living in your family. Okay, so 3 has a few. What about 4? 4 is a few more. 5? Okay, way more for 5. 6? And does anyone have over 6 people living in their family? How many people do you have?
I have my cousin, but my dad's not usually around, so it's kind of 4.
Okay. Does anyone have over 6 people living in their current household? How many people do you have living in your house? Okay. I wonder how many people lived in the houses back prior to 1713. Did anyone find out this information?
We learned this in grade 3.
Okay.
They actually had a ton of people living in their house.
Okay.
It would be because they lived with their grandparents, and they'd live with a ton of their family. It wouldn't just be their immediate family, like their brothers and sisters and parents. It would be the grandparents, their aunts, their uncles, and then they'd. Yeah.
So,
That's for the native.
okay. So if,
We don't know about the Europeans.
so what would we have had to check on?
How many Europeans live in one house? And I see Ella's dying, so I'm going to stop.
Okay, I'm gonna let Ella before she dies over here. Yes, Ella.
Some people even had to live with strangers in the longhouses
Okay.
because they were still building a lot of them and getting stuff because they had to they had to cut down trees and stuff, and that usually took a while. So, yeah.
So if we did have all of these people, let's look at the First Nations who we seem to know more about. If they really did have all these people living together in the same house, how could that have impacted on disease? Mark?
It could impact it on disease by
Like on
could impact on disease because like there'd be like maybe about 30 people living in one hut.
okay.
So one person has a disease.
Yeah.
They're all going to be living in one hut unless they know the person has the disease early. They might put them in a separate hut.
And if everybody is living together, if that actually is the case, which may not be for everyone, but if it is the case, what does that mean? Rudy?
It's gonna the disease transfer is gonna increase a lot
Why?
because people don't know and they're just gonna assume that it's normal. So they're gonna do the same things that they usually do, like eat together and drink the same water, and so it could spread more easily.
Right. And what about medications? Because think about some of these, like influenza. Raise your hand if you saw influenza listed as one of them. Okay? Influenza was one of them. Does anyone know another word for influenza? It's actually a 3-letter word. Raise your hand if you've got the flu before, at some point. Just about all of us. Have any of us died from the flu? So what's different then? Because before people were dying from influenza. So why were they dying then, but we're not dying now from influenza? In fact, some of us barely take time off. Tyler D?
We have medicine to help us.
And,
Actually,
yes?
now we have better and more advanced medicine. Back then, the medicine wasn't as well developed as ours is, because they just had herbs and plants and stuff like that to make their medicine. Now we know a whole bunch of stuff to make our medicine.
We do. Anything else? Faisal?
Also, like now we're more like our bodies are more healthy than before. So like inside our bodies are like stronger and defend the flu better.
Okay. And Mariah?
I think it's mostly about like the community,
Okay.
like where you're living, because if you're living like here in like Hamilton, Manchester,
Yeah.
but it's not like back then you would have like it's hard to explain. It's like now when you have the flu, you go home. Back then you still stay and work, so people will get your influenza
Yeah.
or your flu, but here we won't really get your flu because they're home.
Okay. And Ella?
We also have better, more trained doctors because you have to go to college to be a doctor now. It takes a very long time.
Okay.
So they're probably more trained and they know what they're doing instead of just giving you medicine and you take it yourself.
Okay.
They show you what to do. And we also have better technology
Yeah.
and there's different ways to cure it.
Okay.
And they do everything to keep you safe because if it's not going to work, they won't give it to you.
Yes.
So it kind of
It usually always works.
Okay. And Rudy?
More like doctors, hospitals, pharmacies, and also the technology and how we wash things. Like before we would just like go to the closet, but now we have this like entire pipe system where it's like wash.
Okay. So even just the way that like the water flows is what you're talking about. Okay. Ashkan?
Well, we have like better doctors, and they had lives and died here, and they died because they didn't have that much doctors that time.
Do we know that they didn't have doctors?
Well, they didn't have that much. They probably had.
What did anyone find out about the medical system? Layla?
They had doctors, but they weren't very good doctors at all.
Okay, why do you say that?
Well, it wasn't like today. Like Alice said, you have to go to college to be a doctor.
Okay, so the training would have, it's not really the doctors themselves, it's the training that they're receiving that may have been different. Allie?
Doctors, like if you had a student, you know, you usually wait until it falls out. They would just like yank it out of your mouth.
Okay, do you know that?
I know. And
Okay.
I want to say because they had like so many people in the houses, they would have like on each row they'd have like a row like four beds, but they're made out of wood, and then they put wolf hide on it.
Okay,
And then but they usually have like the adults on the bottom,
Yeah.
and the kids on the top.
okay. And I'm gonna go with Jack and then I'm gonna ask my one question. So one thing that no one's picked up on yet, but we might be able to figure it out. Jack?
One is now we have like healthier food and better food, and back then we had to like dig through food and kill them for the food
How do you know that it's healthier, better food now?
because they used to have like they would have to go around and search for it, but like us we would just go to the grocery store and they would have it.
But is it better that way to go to the grocery store? There is something that might make things better, but I'm not sure the grocery store is it. Might be, but I'm not sure. Hamza?
They might have, the animal that they're killing might have a disease or something.
Okay. So couldn't it have a disease now?
But these days they're like more careful.
Are you sure? What do people think? Yes. Basil?
They like what they do is back then they would just kill the animal and eat it right away, and now like the people who hunt the animals, they would like check the insides and see if it has an infection.
Okay, so there might be some more checking. What else happens in between? Like if we don't eat our meat right away, what do we do with it?
People like what are you doing?
It's okay. I think he's eager to share it, but go for it. What do?
You take it to a butcher who will clean it and cut it up
Okay.
into the meat for you,
Okay.
and clean,
Okay.
or you could just do it yourself.
Is there something else though that we tend to do?
Clean.
Yeah.
Clean out. You take veins out of it.
Okay. That might help, but there might be something else. Rudy, what are you thinking?
We cook our food.
Well, they may have cooked too.
They cook their food.
There was nothing to say they didn't cook. There was a difference, though, I think.
I think if you nowadays if you don't eat your food, you usually put it in the freezer or you throw it out.
Okay.
Back then they just kind of saved it and hung it up.
Okay.
And they eat
Would they have had the same refrigeration process that we had?
No.
Probably not.
No,
The other thing is,
they just hang their
with regards to disease. We talked about something like the flu. I'm thinking of something like smallpox. Does anyone know what you get now so that we don't, because smallpox still kind of exists, but we don't tend to run into the problem of smallpox here. Does anyone know why? Jack? Right. Raise your hand if you've gone to the doctor before to get a vaccine at some point. The shot, which many of you have had at some point or another. Some of you would have been when you were younger, and you'll get older ones now. Vaccines help keep us healthy, but did they have those from before? So look at how, look, Mr. So's question helped us out a lot. What should we say to Mr. So? Okay, now, I'm curious about something. Before I started this, some people said they already knew quite a bit about First Nations people. I just want to know if now through our discussion and your exploration today, raise your hand if you figured out at least one new piece of information.
I figured out more than that.
It's nice to see that people have actually figured out some new things today.